if you don't have a VA, you are the VA.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Automated Lawyer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Fritz, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Schnurbush. Dan, what's going on today?
John, I'm having a good time right now. I'm here with our guest, Joey Vitale, and I'm representing the Indie Law swag. Joey is the owner of Indie Law, a trademark law firm, and has some of the most beautiful branding of any law firm I've seen, if I may say so.
Man, thank you.
And also the owner of Skybreaker, which we'll get into, where he helps attorneys and entrepreneurs with getting in touch with virtual assistants and integrating them into their businesses in really profound ways. So I'm really excited to talk about that today. How you doing, John?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Thursday. It's a beautiful day here in St. Louis. Nice weather. It's just been a great week. I'm excited to talk with Joey about all the things that he's doing. I've kind of watched him from afar through, Maximum Lawyer stuff, and really interested to talk about some of his accomplishments and the different kind of business dynamics that he has going on. So I'm really pumped for today.
Yeah. Before we get into it, there's like some breaking news as of I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday. OpenAI had their dev day. OpenAI, they make ChatGPT and all kinds of cool stuff. And golly, things are moving so fast right now. So last week we were talking about, like AI and can we replace ourselves with robots? John, I know you're working hard at work on a version of that. And you're not going to believe this. So, last week they launched the advanced voice mode to the cell phone app. So if you're a pro user only, you have to be a paid subscriber. But if you're a pro user, you can now use the advanced voice mode. And basically, if you have the pro subscription and you have the phone app, check it out. Make sure it's the advanced voice. It sounds like a real person. You're talking to imperceptible, super high latency. It sounds just like you're talking to a real person. It has the same emotional affect. They'll laugh and make jokes. And if you've seen the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, we are there. We're there. Hands down, no question. We are there. People are going to start having romantic relationships with their. Yeah, I have
Slow down, buddy. Slow down.
No doubt about this. They're going to jailbreak their bots, and it's happening. But yesterday they released the advanced voice mode to the API. So what this means is that every software can now bake this top level, high quality voice interface into everything, anything. Your legal apps can now have a voice assistant that works. It can execute functions. So it can perform things in the software with a natural set. You can imagine a world where you just open up your browser, you've got your MyCase or Clio open, and you're just talking to it throughout the day. Hey, can you write a new task for Jimmy or whatever? It's just crazy, But
That is nuts.
yes.
I think too, and we'll get into, I guess, what I'm here to talk about, but I think that's such a cool topic because I feel like the technology is changing, but also there's a generational change happening. And I was watching my nephew on his iPad the other day talk to his iPad in a much more natural way than I've ever talked to a piece of technology. He was just asking it questions. And you guys might have a different, just natural inclination to talk to your stuff. For me, that still feels very awkward.
Yeah.
But I think as we get more comfortable with it, the younger generations are going to take this and run with it in a way that just feels so foreign to us.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. I'm sure that's true. In the same way that working an iPhone feels radically more intuitive to us than it does to our grandparents.
Yeah.
Talking to robots is going to feel a lot more normal to our kids and grandkids.
I love the talking aspect though. I think it adds another layer of dynamics, especially for kids. I know my 6-year-old, likes to talk to, my house is Google Home integrated, right? And he loves to go up and talk to them about baseball cards, right? And so But that's so much better, at least in my opinion, than sitting at a screen and just scrolling, right? And just, not having that interaction, or at least
Yeah.
some sort of kind of verbal interaction. I know I'm not a huge screen time person, but I think it adds another component, I think, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the effect that it's going to hopefully have on just especially like parents and people of our generation, and like breaking that screen addiction a little bit. Like, if I don't have to pick my phone up anymore to like make something happen, if I can just be like, hey, Janice or whatever I want to name my robot, can you, write an email to so and so and actually have it be good and sent correctly? Or can you create a task in my case or whatever, or generate a document? And never have to touch a screen, and just like never, get that dopamine hit and just let it go and see what that effects that has on our society. Interested to see how that plays out. But Joey is, I'm going to call him an expert on leveraging virtual team members in all over the world, and putting together these teams of in predominantly virtual environment to execute at a really high level. But I'm curious, like, you weren't born that way. So how did you get to the point of, being, Joey Vitale, the fresh law graduate, to where you're at now? In a nutshell, what does that story look like?
Sure. So I graduated law school, did your typical courtroom litigation work for 2 years, realized I am not meant for the courtroom. I'm a lover, not a fighter. So I quickly pivoted into business uh, and business law. And I started my own law firm because honestly, I couldn't find a job. And I was launching with the idea of, let me be one of those everything business attorneys, where whether you need a contract or an LLC, um, or whatever it is, I can learn it, I can help you. Um, then after joining groups like Maximum Lawyer, I was like, wait, I can think about this smarter. Um, what is more of a single offer, kind of like an assembly line that I can build just to make it easier and more profitable to build the firm, and focus on what business owners really need. And what we found in our first year, again, I was trying to figure out, okay, where do I zoom in on? What kept happening was our clients were getting blindsided by trademark cease and desist letters,
Huh.
realizing they were accidentally infringing on another name, or thinking they had done stuff to legally call dibs on their business name, and then finding out that they really didn't take the proper trademark steps. So it was a combination of, this is a smart business move, and really giving people what they most need. And so we started with that, quickly found a lot of people, especially smaller, more emerging businesses, couldn't afford to work with a business attorney. So that's when I was like, let me create an online course. I'm giving you the 2x speed version of this.
Sure.
Um, so I got into the world of online course building, bought some courses, found a really great coach. And it was then when I learned about this world of passive income, info products, launching some type of a signature course every quarter, running Facebook ads to it, and that kind of thing. And this was maybe 5-6 years ago. But in those groups, the big thing that people were talking about was virtual assistants and overseas VAs, and this idea of hiring someone in the Philippines less than $10 an hour, sounding like it was crazy and not even ethical, but hearing good stories about how it was working well. And so, speeding up 5 or 6 years, I feel like the topic of overseas virtual assistants has gone from a kind of well-kept secret to a not so well-kept secret,
Yeah.
becoming more popular, that people are learning about. And so I just kind of got lucky in terms of being in the right place at the right time at the right conferences, where um, I was on like the cutting edge of doing things with virtual assistants. People were wanting that to be a speaking topic. And there's an interesting puzzle for lawyers to solve with this, because the work that we do can be so sophisticated and complex. And we did go to law school, so we all are pretty perfectionist and always thinking in terms of worst case scenarios. So there are a lot of factors that go into, yeah, I'd love to bring on an overseas administrative VA, but that can be hard in my business. And so at that point, we were like, you know what? Let's really do what we can to help lawyers figure this out, because as you guys both know, like automation is so powerful, and whatever we can do to make the business run easier without having to pay what we need to pay for is just such a no-brainer option moving forward. And we recently made the big step for us to work with a marketing agency. And yes, that was a layer of an investment that we haven't had before. But because we have our own in-house team of VAs doing certain implementation work, metric tracking, it's really bringing down the cost of that marketing agency in terms of what some other firm would do if they didn't have that internal team on the ground.
Um, and I remember it was probably a couple years ago now. But I remember being extremely struck by something you had said about having overseas team members. And I'll put a pin in that term that I'm using there. About using overseas team members to manage your other overseas team members. You've gotten now your system to the point that you have middle management of and by
Yes.
your virtual team members. Tell me about that. How did you get to that point? When did you say, well, it's time to install someone in between me and the front line? What did that
My
look like?
gosh. Great question. Thank you for asking. I love geeking out on this stuff. Again, so many of the steps that I take is like, I again, like I'm not meant for the courtroom. Let me pivot. It was kind of like a perceived weakness of mine that I kind of pivoted into what, looking back, kind of turned into like a strength. A lot of this came from reading the Traction book, all about team building, and feeling like, oh man, like this sounds great in theory of having middle management and managers and leaders and really getting out of all the seats in the business. But I can't afford all those people. And so it became a sense of like, if we could wave a magic wand here, what could we do? And around that time, I did have like a handful of VAs. And so we decided to go from a handful of VAs that were all kind of doing work, and I was meeting with all of them each week to figure out how they could get their work done, to having more of a management leadership team in place, where now we have a team of 4 different VAs that manage the rest in our 4 different departments in the firm. And then we have 1 chief VA that oversees the managers. And so that's effective in a lot of ways, but one of the great ones is it allows for the business to have standing weekly meetings without me having to be one-on-one or finding a time to meet with all of them.
Yeah. And it's wild because, like, theoretically that structure becomes, no, I don't want to say infinitely scalable, but much more scalable than what I'm at the top of the pyramid, or I'm working one-on-one with everybody kind of structure.
Absolutely.
So, and before we get any further into that, I want to bring this up, this concept of the term VA, and I think it has certain connotations, like about what can be done with that, what kinds of tasks are best suited. And I think there is probably some truth in that connotation, but obviously if you're in, getting virtual team members into this middle management position, and even kind of what is effectively an upper management position, do you think, what do you see as the scope of function that can work well with a virtual team? Are there any limitations to this, or is it really just
Yeah.
your imagination?
Well, I do think that there can be connotations in both directions that are worth being mindful of. Again, I love and respect my overseas team, and I do my best to really think about the numbers of all of this. And so the way that we look at it is going back to that slogan that I always think of like, if you don't have a VA, you are the VA, kind of a thing. And there are tasks in your business, even if you are a high-end, expensive law firm, that are $10 an hour or less tasks. And so let's start there. Instead of having someone that you're paying $25 an hour plus do those tasks, let's find someone who can ethically and fairly get paid $6, $8 an hour and have them get trained on it. I do think that we really do want to hire from the bottom up here. So what our rule of thumb is, overseas VAs are great and they require strong SOPs. These aren't mind readers. This isn't a, hey, we're going to assign them difficult research projects and hope that they can be unicorns here. It's, we will be training them up on how to do these pretty simple tasks based on these very clear SOPs. And that's something that the business has to put together. But once that's in place, it's then really helpful to think about the distinction between a leader and a manager. Because managers manage things, leaders lead people. And so if the things that are needing to be managed are $10 an hour things, all it takes is somebody that has had past experience with those things to just check in and make sure that things are being done and done properly.
Yeah.
And to the extent that they're not, they escalate it up. So what we do as much as we can is we have our overseas team mostly working on administrative tasks that are less than $10 an hour. If they prove themselves to go into middle management or be like our director management team, that's a pay bump then of $12 to $15 an hour. And now you're looking at, again, that versus your typical manager in the US, which is way more. And then we pay our chief VA, I think around $20 an hour, which is a big jump for him. But again, a real cost saving compared to, some fractional US teammate.
Yeah.
And Joey, I love this hierarchy system that you've created. And honestly, I've never even never heard of this kind of system when it comes, with VA specifically, right? Obviously, people do this system all the time in business, right? And their internal
Yeah.
management. It's really intriguing. I love working. I have virtual team members myself that are some are overseas. I have some in the US. It's just really. I would agree with you 100%. It's if you're not considering doing hiring a VA or somebody who is virtual, I think that you're doing yourself a disservice, right, at this point in time when it comes to law firm ownership. But look, like my question for you is, obviously you have all of these bodies and seats, right? Even though they're virtual, they're all over the the world probably when it comes to bodies. How important has technology been in building this infrastructure? And what sort of tech tools do you like to use, or what helps you facilitate this kind of infrastructure from a technology standpoint?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so I mean, on the one hand, this wouldn't be possible without technology, right? And so there's so much tech that we do depend on. We do use Slack for our team communications, and we do have some rules in place there. So one of them is we really try and keep individual DMing in Slack to a minimum. And we, as the part of the onboarding process, we train all of our team, including our VAs, that when you need to communicate, look to certain channels that make sense, just so that if you or the person that you're wanting to talk to goes out of office or something happens, the rest of the business has access to that conversation and can reference it. We also use ClickUp for our project management system, and the rule that we try and stay in alignment with as much as possible is for any communication that is really project specific, we want that to stay in ClickUp, and then for any other conversations to be in Slack. And we do have like time tracking stuff, but I will say that we try and really lead the team with a sense of trust being something that is given and earned simultaneously. And so we found that it's a really bad culture move to start off with this sense of, we don't trust you. We're going to record time tracking tools on your website to make sure that you're doing work. the time tracking that we encourage is more about, look, we want to make sure that we're paying you fairly for the work that you're doing. And so we do want you to keep track of how much time you're spending, so that if you start to reach the expectations of for the week or the month, let us know so that you're not working overtime and not getting paid more.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I want to riff on this for a second. I've heard people make the objection that $6, $8 an hour. How can you? That's ridiculous. Why would you feel? How can you sleep at night paying someone like that? I don't know if you've ever looked into the statistics, but I want to get your reaction to that kind of train of thought.
Yeah. That was my gut initial instinct as well, of like, oh, this doesn't feel right. But my coach encouraged me to really approach it from a place of listening instead of making my own assumptions. And after interviewing candidates and having more and more conversations with some of the ones that I've worked with for years, they've really confirmed that what we are paying them is comparable to what doctors are making, especially in the Philippines and Central America. So it really is good pay relatively there. And lifestyle wise, them being able to work from home is a huge win over having to travel for work for them.
Yeah, yeah. I need to update this and see if I could get the modern statistics. But I remember looking into this just out of curiosity and looking at the Philippines. I'm going to take the Philippines as an example.
Yeah.
Looking at their, average annual incomes and median incomes, and it's amazing that $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour. If my economics and math, and I was reading everything correctly, puts a lot of folks in the like 98th percentile of national income earners, which so near some of the highest earning people in the country, which is hard to fathom when you're in the States and everything's so dang expensive and all that. But so I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I like the point about listening and getting the perspective of the people you're working with rather than carrying in your own assumption. I think there's a lot of value in that.
I agree as well. And Joey, I'm really interested in also when it comes to, you have these two companies, right? You have your law firm and you have, your VA business or, where you're helping other law firms, place VAs, right? How was the evolution? I mean, how far along was your law firm when you decided? I mean, did it click that you needed extra help, and then you're like, well, there's a huge market for this? Like, how did that evolve? And like, and then when it comes to those two kind of entities, and I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk inside baseball on this, because it was not totally on purpose. So the way that it broke down in so many ways was that we were having success with VAs. Dan, as you might recall, like I was asked to speak at a conference and created a here is my SOP for how to put a job posting on like a Filipino jobs board, qualify the candidates, do the interviews, hire. I must have gotten around 100 or so people to opt into this Google Doc. I followed up with all of them, and maybe one person used it. Everyone else was like, "Oh yeah, it was cool to have, but I haven't touched it." So I was like, "Okay, there's something to people needing to invest. I think something to take a next step on this." So I did have the seeds of, okay, there's got to be some like revenue generating offer here. And at the same time, I was looking at staffing agencies in terms of, okay, is there already a solution out there that I can send people to? Kind of in the nature of like, if you want to start a 401k, or I'm sorry, if you want to start a 501c3 nonprofit, but there's already a really good one set up, why not just recommend people to that one instead of setting up your own kind of thing? But we found that the typical staffing agency model just doesn't work for a lot of law firm owners. because it requires full time, which a lot of law firm owners don't really need for their first VA. It creates a necessary middleman instead of keeping the cost down even more. And what we found is that overseas VAs, just like any human being, like their loyalties lie with their true boss. And it just, all of the stories that we were hearing was people, the VAs saw themselves as more of the staffing company's teammate than the law firm owners. Meanwhile, we had the aha that, you know what, we don't necessarily need to hire anybody if we put out a job posting and do interviews. And so why don't we proactively always just be having job postings out there and interviewing candidates so that when the timing is right, we can just say yes instead of having to be in reactive mode. So we were kind of accidentally, in terms of this business, just building a huge bench of candidates that we have already vetted. And so in a lot of ways, when Skybreaker started its VA Finder service, it was really like, hey, do you want access to this bench that we've already created? And you can hire them directly instead of having to pay a typical staffing agency every month.
So I want to circle back to something, that I raised at the beginning of the show with, and we talk about a lot is this AI wave that I personally believe is going to define the next 100 years. I think it's going to be as important, if not more important, than the invention of the internet and automobiles. And I think it'll be looked back upon at that level, and smartphones and things like that. What do you see as kind of the interplay or the role of or the interaction between AI and VAs? Are they synergistic? Is AI going to overtake the roles of virtual team members and assistants, or is it just going to augment them? What do you think is in
Yeah.
this?
Well, as we talked about, I think a couple weeks ago, Dan, I think there's really this like trinity of automation, AI, and VAs kind of all working together, right? And so if you can combine AI with automations, which people might say like that's kind of almost a part of AI now, maybe. But that allows for a lot of efficiencies and productivity. But there still should be, and maybe at some point this won't be a thing, but like right now, there needs to be someone prompting the AI. Knowing what those good prompts are, there needs to be someone creating the automations or testing and checking them. And we have a VA whose one of his main metrics is to monitor Zapier, and whenever things fail or break down or whatever, to make sure that we see it doesn't go unnoticed. And right now we're working on training our VAs and our entire team really around like the SOP meets AI intersection of how can AI help higher level teammates get a strong SOP faster to then have the VA work on and implement. Because so much of this is, I have this thing that I need to get off my plate, but it's really hard to explain.
Yeah. I'm really interested in seeing where all this shakes out. And one of my pet projects right now is trying to build an AI receptionist and scheduling assistant and lead screener, because those are a few, we pay for people to do it right now. And right now we're using an outsourced reception service, and they're doing fine, doing a great job. But I just think it's cool to have to be at the point now where we can potentially bring that in house with a machine. And what is that going to look like? How is it going to impact customer service, if at all? But we'll have to see. So what, if you had to put pick one, what would you think is the biggest misconception or thing that holds people back from hiring overseas team members?
I think the biggest one is a fear of potential problems. Uh, Fears of, what if this VA steals from the company? What if they put client information on the black market and sell it? What if they actually aren't who they say they are, or they're like running an agency behind the scenes and they're delegating work to people? There's this idea of like, I can't trust
Mm.
this person. And that's something that we tend to hear the most from people who haven't yet taken a step. Um, and to that, I say like, look, I get it. I also went to law school and had worst case scenarios ingrained in my brain. But there is always a risk and a cost to things. And if you continue to do this, there are risks to your business.
Mm.
And I can spout out, my own experience of having worked with hundreds of VAs and never encountering an issue of XYZ, or it only happening for XYZ reasons. And like, here are tips that I would recommend putting in place. I'll say this though, just like with Facebook ads or your intake calls, there is a conversion rate of the number of VAs that it might take to hire and onboard for you to get a good one. And so it's not a question of, man, what do I need to do so that I hire one VA and they completely change my life? It's more about, how can I get to a point where I am increasing my at bats here so that I'm at a healthy pace of, in the past year, having hired 5 VAs and 3 of them are still on the team and doing a good job.
Yeah. Right. I mean, well, that's true of any team member, right? Because like
Yeah.
I think it was Tyson Mutrux was talking about how they scaled back their team and really focused on, I think he was calling them A players or just top performing people. And you don't always get those people on the first try, the people that, whether they're overseas or whether they're local in your physical office, like it can be tricky to find somebody that, really checks all the boxes and is an all-star. But it makes such a massive difference when it,
Yeah.
when it does happen. And fortunately in the VA ecosystem, it is possible to, and a little bit lower risk perhaps, to develop a process of testing relationships. Is this going to work out? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's more of I think a lot of people use VAs in more of a freelance capacity, and it's a good way of feeling out the relationship and seeing, is it gonna work?
Okay. So you use the word freelancer, which is crazy because it's what I was thinking of going, where I was thinking of going next. But I want to use it in a slightly different way. So I mentioned earlier that we're now working with like a marketing agency to help us with paid ads and stuff for the law firm. I don't know if you guys have experience with this, but like in the past 8 years or so of running the firm, I've hired like your typical like agency for help with stuff. And there have been times when I've hired more of just like a freelancer that like I was connected to, or like I found maybe on Upwork to help with something. And the customer experience, even if the results were kind of good across the board, the customer experience was very noticeably different. Where if I worked with a freelancer, I would hop on a Zoom call with them and they'd be like, hey, so tell me what's going on. Let me take notes. And yeah, here's how I can help. When I signed up with this agency, I could tell that they had their processes and systems baked in. I was getting, Google Docs with checkboxes of to-do lists and things. It was very clear on the receiving end that one of those options was more of a freelancer of an expert. The other one was more of like an agency style expert. And I say that because as a law firm owner, you're either running your firm as a freelancer or an agency. it's really hard to have success with VAs if you stick with the freelancer mentality.
Mm,
It works best if you lean into saying, no, we are going to shift this into an agency. We are going to have clear systems and processes for every time we get a new client or a new lead. And it's because of those recurring projects and tasks and SOPs that get fired that make a VA's job easy because they're doing the same things every week, every month.
yeah.
I think that you're hitting on a big point here, and you've said the word SOPs a lot during this conversation. That's one thing I don't think that law firms have in place enough. I mean, they understand what their SOPs are, but they're not documented, right? If
Right.
everybody were wiped out one day and somebody else came in, or let's just say the business was sold to somebody else, right? Can they come in and operate the business on day one based upon the same systematic procedures that you put in place? The answer is probably no for most law firms. So I think that's a huge point. Um, in addition to, the procedures, you know, I'm a little bit curious about some of the automations and some of the different things, that tools that you're using. I mean, you have your law firm, you have the VA business. What are some of the automations, or what are the most important automations or things that you're using, in either or both, right, to help facilitate that really awesome streamlined procedure when it comes to that client experience, right?
Ah, oh man. Well, I hope that this turns into more of a conversation of all of us talking and not just me. Because I know you guys have good recommendations here as well. I will say that we've taken the approach of um, working with specific tools that are usually less expensive but can work really well together versus trying to have some expensive, fancy all-in-one solution.
Yeah.
We use very little like legal technology to run the firm.
Mm,
And because of that, we do have automations, and Zapier make sure that these tools are all speaking to each other effectively. Um, and that I think allows us to have the best of both worlds. And then we also, I mean, one of my favorite sets of automations is we have 5 or 6 different um, channels in Slack that are all like celebration dash something. So it's like celebration dash calls, celebration dash sales, celebration dash Google reviews, celebration dash new teammate. And all of those are automated based on something happening, but it allows the team to celebrate together and do like a confetti emoji or whatever when we see it.
Mm, that's awesome.
And as the more that I have teammates handling the rest, I'm sure there are a bunch of automations happening, but what I see and interact with the most are more of like the team-based ones, the culture ones. Um, like we have an automation that prompts the team every week to with like what we call like our weekly high five, where someone on the team has to tag and be specific about high fiving another teammate and what they did in the past week. And then that teammate does the same thing, and it can't be the same teammate.
mm,
That's awesome. I've
mm,
I've I've never heard anybody honestly talk about automations in the context of creating culture. I think you're the very first
Mm.
person, and I think that's really cool. And I think that's a really big point as well when it comes to having people that are not in your office physically, keeping that corporate culture and having everybody feel integrated as a team. I think is really, really huge.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back too to what you said about the value of having our layer of management around overseas VAs. I think that those VA managers and overseas leaders are able to provide a sense of culture and togetherness that I can't. So now there are Slack channels that I don't even have access to where they're able to speak to each other in their own language um, more proficiently about, movies or books that they read or whatever.
Very cool.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you there, that John. I think that's the first time I've heard anybody talk about using automation for culture purposes. And it's amazing how infrequently the concept of culture seems to come up in, at least it's usually most people are focused on, where's the profit at? Are we making money? What's our sales, our conversion rate? Da, da, da. The focus is always on productivity, efficiency, and there is what I think is kind of ironic is that there is underpinning all of those things is the culture of the organization. Um,
Yes. Well, I also wanted to highlight this. So I've become a big fan of like profit first, right? Of building your business by design so that um, like profit almost has to happen instead of like spending a bunch of money and hoping that things work out and you get the ROI. And I think part of the reason why I my brain gets to go to culture faster is because our direction of hiring and overseas VAs allows us to not have to deal with a lot of the typical pressures business owners have around profit and other types of metrics. And so, yes, we're working on those things, but it's more of a given that it's there.
Mm.
And so we to shift to more of the team stuff.
well, I think that's an unforeseen, but at least maybe unforeseen from the outside. Like you're not necessarily
Well,
expecting that that's going to be the byproduct of this shift, but
Yeah.
it is an interesting salutary byproduct that if your team is not as expensive to employ, I always come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the psychological concept that, if you're trying to get food on your plate, like thinking about self-actualization and like, is my team, feeling fulfilled and stuff, that's not even on your radar. Like you're worried about covering your mortgage, right? So
Right.
the idea that you can build an organization that that from the ground up, and we're working with a team that allows you to cover those basics um, without as much stress, um, just kind of innately opens you up to ask these questions like, does my team feel happy here? Are they content with their work? Do they feel like they have the tools they need? Are they feeling empowered and fulfilled? And are they celebrated? And do they feel valued as a person? Like there are so many law firm owners who cannot even, they don't have the brain space right now to ask these questions.
Yeah, and it's not because they're bad people.
No.
It's just that they're lower on the hierarchy, like you
Yep.
said.
Lower on the hierarchy. And it's an interesting effect. I hadn't even considered that, but it is true. And we've noticed that as well. I've never noticed the connection, but now I'm seeing it
Yeah.
that it does open you up. Now my approach is often to, I am more of a micro business kind of thing. I don't have a large team. My approach is always, how do I automate this and turn it into a robot or an AI? So it's interesting to see
Totally.
the other end of this. Well, not the other end of the spectrum, but a different take on getting to a similar end where we've got a team that's maybe not quite as many robots in the picture, but there's some, but and still achieving high level results. I think it's really cool. There are a lot of different ways to build this law firm thing.
There have been many years where I was hesitant to say that I wanted to build more of a lifestyle firm for myself, but that really is my goal. It's not about being number one in the state or in the country or whatever. And it's not really about building a legacy as much as we appreciate that our branding is nice and getting better. It really is, let's make sure that this is a business that is sustainable and easy and fun for me and whatever size of team it takes
Yeah.
to do it well.
Yeah, I hear you.
when it comes to, I know we talked about a lot about automations and SOPs, and kind of one of my last questions for you, Joey, is, when it comes to AI, and we're all kind of, some of us are just, are really into AI, or they're just kind of dipping their toes in the water. They haven't even touched it. So for you personally, with both of your businesses, how are you currently using AI, or what is one way that you'd love to be able to use AI in the future when it comes to, streamlining your operations?
Oh man. Um, I I mean, I guess relative to like the average person, I'm ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But I say that knowing who I'm in the room with right now, and so there's a lot of room for improvement. I do think that one thing that is uh, either a limiting belief for me or just something that's preventing me from going all in is I am aware of security and privacy layers with this. And so we are wanting, we haven't gone to the level of like putting in like confidential information en masse to get certain stuff taken out because I just don't know exactly who has access to that information.
Sure.
And we are starting to explore like alternatives to Chat GPT or other types of tools that do have promises of just heightened security around things. But what's interesting is the solutions that I've found so far. And Dan, I think I told you about that like Avia
Mhm.
tool that I found.
Mhm.
One of the limitations to that app, which I was like, oh shoot, this doesn't really work right well, is it's very difficult to upload files into the thing. And whenever I go back into ChatGPT to do a quick thing, I right now I'm getting the most of like, here is here's some super long PDF
Mm.
or a transcript of a 2-hour long like video that I have access to in an online course. Give me it's like the time saving nature of that, which is super helpful. And then right now, honestly, I'm getting a ton of just personal value
Mm.
of like canceling my subscription to a virtual fitness coach that I was paying like $200 a month to, and now just using ChatGPT to like create workout routines for me. And I check in with it and it tells me what to do next.
Yeah. That's awesome. I do the same thing when it comes to, I'm like, yeah, Tuesday I need to do XYZ, like when it comes to, fitness or even just like, like health, you want to make a, a meal that's high in protein, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's really cool doing that as well. So I'm
I have
a big fan.
I have found it to be an exceptional movie and TV companion. It's like we've been watching through the Rings of Power, which I'll watch it because I'm a Tolkien fanatic. But you'll see things and you'll remember like, is that really what was Galadriel's history at this time? You just pop it in ChatGPT and you have to search, and it's like, hey, Galadriel in the Second Age was da 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 da, and you're like, oh, okay, great, I got the answer. So it's remarkable how much context you can add to any, I mean, especially like historical stuff. If you want to understand more about the motivations, if you're like watching The Crown, or for example, and you want to know more about what's going, it's so easy to just ask a question and have it add a ton of interesting context to what you're doing. But
Yeah, and it's crazy how it's also like, I mean, yeah, it might get certain information wrong sometimes, but like it is overwhelmingly accurate, which is nuts. And I'm going to share with you guys just in case you have any experience around it. But a cool AI story recently is I was having a Zoom session with one of my VAs the other day where on the call I shared my screen and I was like, I want to send out an email to our audience about X. So I went into ChatGPT and I put in a certain prompt, and then I copied the email that it wrote and put it into our email service. And I started editing it. And the VA was like, can you just talk out as you're changing this, like why you're changing certain things? Because he was like, I also use AI, but I know that you're still tweaking stuff that like is AI generated. And the more that I can get inside your brain to figure out how you're doing that, the more I can save you time.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that is something that I'm really interested in. Like, how can I create a process of not just using ChatGPT to create something, but then what is my typical thought process around tweaks that I tend to make so that they can make those and save me time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're starting to come up on time here. So one of the things we always do is we'll come up with a couple of just a tip of the week of something related to whatever. It doesn't really need to be related to tech. And we typically do things related to tech and automation, but whatever, something you've gotten a lot of value from, maybe a book you've read or a process you've implemented or something like that, that you want to encourage listeners to explore on their own. I'll go first. Give you a minute to think if you haven't. So one thing I want people to check out is, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I'd have to double check the timelines, the OpenAI preview, O1 preview came out. And this is fundamentally, it's a different implementation of the 4.0 model. And basically what they did with this new model is they gave it time to think. So rather than immediately responding to your question, it will think. No matter how complex a prompt you give it, it will sit and think through it and analyze it in detail, how to respond. And you could give it a tremendous amount of context. It has the largest context window and the largest output window of any model ever. It can now output over 65,000 tokens, which is about 30,000 words. So we're talking, chapters and chapters of books that it can output in one prompt response, not even prompting it to continue, just in one output,
Wow.
it can now output that. And what I encourage you to do is check it out. Just search for, OpenAI O1 preview and find the research paper. There's a publicly available research paper on the OpenAI website where you can read and see their comparisons to other models, see how much better it is than the previous models, and how it's now ranking in the top 500 for math competitions around the globe compared to real human mathematicians and things like that. But there's one particular area in there that's shocking is where they give you an example of a cryptographic prompt where they're asking the AI to solve a complex cipher when decoding an encoded message. And what they provide for you is the chain of thought reasoning, is the new system they implemented, is the time to think. And you can see it in words. They actually hide it now in the final system, the public one that you can face it. They hide it. They don't show you the chain of thought. They'll only show you like a summary of the chain of thought. But you can see in the research paper, they'll show you an original full-length chain of thought in solving this cipher. And it is both amazing and terrifying. It looks like the words that would be forming in your brain as you're thinking through a complicated problem. It's like, oh, well, here's the cipher. We know this is the word. Maybe it's this. Let's try this. And then it'll think through and work out. Oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try this other thing. Let's start swapping these. And it ends up solving the cipher after pages and pages and pages and pages of thinking, like 20, 30 pages of just written text thinking through the problem. And only after it was finished did it output the response. It thought for several minutes on how to process this issue. So check out the new O1 model. If you pay for Pro, you can play with the O1 preview and throw complex things that you're stuck on at it.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, like let's say you're stuck on a marketing problem or a process problem in your business or whatever it is, whatever you're struggling with to figure out to take you to the next level. Give it lots and lots of context. Provide everything you could possibly think would be relevant to the question that you would think about, the things that are going through your head when you're deciding, what should I do about this team member? They're really not performing at the level I need them to, what kind of thing, give it everything you feel like you need to know to process that question and see what it comes up with. Cause it's getting shockingly good at reasoning intelligently. And this is a long tip. I apologize. But check out the O1 preview, and the new O1 non-preview model is coming out soon, which is supposed to be an order of magnitude even better than the preview model. So we're in unprecedented times. But check it out; it's absolutely wild. O1 preview.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here real quick, and then Joey, we'll let you kind of finish things up. So my tech tip of the week is. This kind of falls in line with a lot of stuff we've been talking about, but Dan had talked about a really cool, chat. I guess we'll call it a chat bot, but not one that could actually respond to phone calls coming in right directly and doing intakes. But my tech tip is look at all the expenses. Like I do an expense audit probably at least once a quarter, and go through all my expenses and say, okay, what am I spending money on, and where can I reduce expenses in certain areas, okay? And specifically, how do I use AI or a tool to reduce an expense? So Dan's looking at, reducing his intake service by creating a bot that can actually correspond with people, answer phones, take in information, and then push it into a CRM, right? And that's super cool. I'm using some AI stuff for some intake processes, but my tip is see where you're spending money. Look and see how you can use AI to reduce an expense along your chain. And there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, instead of paying somebody to run PPC ads for you, maybe you use ChatGPT to create the actual ads, right? And do it yourself. Maybe, I know there's people that are using ChatGPT or using different AI tools for creating content for SEO purposes, right? As opposed to paying somebody to do that, right? So take a look at all the stuff you're spending money on, see where you can use AI to reduce some of your expenses and increase your profitability.
Yeah. Or virtual assistants, right, Joy?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And again, both is such a win-win. One thing that I've started doing, someone recommended it to me, and I've been blown away by how effective it is almost all of my prompting now includes the sentence "be detailed," and it's especially for like if I'm wanting to create a blog post or I'm wanting help with an SEO problem or whatever. It's crazy how much more helpful of an answer I get when I include that sentence than when I don't.
That's very interesting. I think that, I've been creating this custom GPT, and Joey, I'd love to talk to you offline. I think it would be helpful for you and kind of that,
Yeah.
your SOPs and all that stuff. But one of the things is that I always say, review all of your documents and instructions before providing a response. So I've included that in the prompt. And then I started hard
Mhm.
coding that in so I don't have to include it. So I'm starting,
Smart.
but you're totally right though. When it comes to the chat GPTs and everything, you need to provide that very specific instruction. You get a totally different answer. So that's a great point.
My favorite mix in for your prompt is at the end, say, ask me follow-up questions so that you can provide a better answer. And in response, it will go boom, 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 boom. I need to know these 5 things or 10 things. And then you answer those 10 things. And then the response you're going to get is market. Because what it's doing is it's trying to pull in more context. And that's the thing that AIs lack, is they don't have context. They have all the context in the world. And as a result, they have no context because they know everything about everything. But they don't know if you're asking about probate laws. Well, you say something about probate. Well, it's like, well, which state are we in? What county are we in? Who's the judge? What kind of case do you have? What are the facts? How many assets do you have? Like, they need that. To be able to, just like a human needs that. But the thing is that humans have baked in context. We come to the table with an understanding of time and place and relevance and what types of things to include in our, knowledge store and our reference. But with an AI, they need to be given that context to be useful. And I think that'll increasingly be less true over time. But anyway, so that's it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening. Joey, welcome. It was wonderful to have you. If somebody wants to get in touch with you to either set up a trademark or learn to manage VAs and hire VAs, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, feel free to just email me at joey@skybreakergroup.com. And if you guys haven't done so yet, go to the podcast that you're listening to and make sure that you leave a review.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. Dan, you really got the ball on that one, but Joey picked it up. So thanks so much. Honestly,
go ahead.
It was a pleasure having you on, Joey. I love your energy. I love all the things you're doing in both spaces, and we really appreciate your insight today.
Yeah.
Honor being here. A lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. So as Joey said, if you're on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, leave us a 5-star review so other people can find us. If you want to take the conversation offline, please join us in the Legal Tech Collective Facebook group where we talk about tech and AI and VAs and all kinds of fun stuff like this every day. If you have any problems or questions or just want to learn some new stuff, come hang out in the group and you might learn something. But that's it for this week, guys. Thanks again. Take it easy.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.